Hello. So, the day that this comes out, the In the Heights movie has finally been released to the public after like a year or so of waiting. I watched it a couple days ago at like a screening sort of thing, and I've noticed that there's not many people talking about it, especially people of color, specifically Latin people. I've seen a lot of white people sharing their opinions, but not enough Latin people, so here I am to share my opinions about the movie. Obviously, big spoilers for the movie and for the musical. If you want to just go see it, if you want to see the movie or even see the musical. The musical, there's like a slime tutorial up on YouTube if you want to look that up. But if you don't want spoilers, don't watch this video. This is your warning. I want to just start by saying, though, that this is not a bad movie in my mind. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's a very bad adaptation, but I don't think it's a bad movie. I think if I never had seen the musical and knew nothing going into it, I would have had a nice, cool, fun time. But, like, knowing the musical and knowing how good the musical was going into this show, or into this movie, I wouldn't say it was disappointing, because it wasn't bad. I'm just more so confused about all the changes that they made that don't make any sense. Because I think that the storytelling ability in the movie is a lot worse than in the musical. And I think if the musical didn't have such a good, strong narrative and a good, like, storytelling flow, then I wouldn't have expected the movie to be better than it was, if that makes any sense. Point is, movie good, adaptation of the musical bad. But let's just get into it. I have a very long amount of notes, and I have about an hour and a half to get through it all. So let's just get into it. They killed Nina's mother. For why? For what is why? I'm guessing they just wanted to cut her song. But, like, you could have just cut her song. She didn't have to sing a song. You cut a bunch of other songs with no explanation. You could have just cut her song. Like, it doesn't add anything to the movie for them to have cut Nina's mom out of it. Like, Nina's character doesn't gain anything from having lost her mother. It's not like, oh, I have to do this because I know it would make my mother so proud and I want to carry on her legacy of blah, blah, blah. It like, adds nothing. There's a few throwaway lines about how, oh, your mother would be so proud, blah, blah, blah. But that's, like, it. It adds nothing to the story for Nina's mother to not be around. They could have easily just had her in the story and had her be, like, a minor character. But, like, I also haven't seen any, like, interviews with the cast or, like, with the director or anything, so I don't know, like, their artistic vision or whatever going into this, but I don't really care. I don't think it matters because, again, I think you should be able to just watch a movie or watch a piece of media and understand it from the jump. Like what I said about, like, Shadowhunters is that you shouldn't have to read the books to understand the show. It should just be a piece of media on its own that you can consume without having seen the previous media. So, like, it doesn't make any sense for them to have killed Nina's mother. Point is, I don't get that. Because then it also made them change a bunch of lines where they refer to Nina having two parents. Or there's lines, like, in the opening number with, the Usnavi come over for dinner, there's plenty to eat. They had to change that whole line because she wasn't there. And I just think it was unnecessary. They could have just had her be alive. It was, I don't know. I think also in general, I might have made a note about this. I have a lot of fucking notes. Oh my god. I think also in general that, we'll get into Vanessa later, but I think they took a lot of Nina's screen time in order to give Vanessa more screen time and give her character more of a point in the story, which I don't think helped the narrative at all. I think Nina was already a great female character in this story, and them subtracting from her overall impact on the overall arching narrative didn't help anything, especially since it was just given to Vanessa, who added nothing to the story. I think that they wanted to maybe add more of an impact on the Kevin and Nina scenes, like their dynamic together, but I don't think I think we would have gotten just about the same amount of, like, emotional impact if her mother was there. Like we gained nothing. It's not like, oh, dead mom, sad. It wasn't that. She was just dead and it was fine or whatever. I don't get it. I didn't think that they needed to do that. Continuing on with Nina, though. Maybe I'm just very biased because I also went to an elite PWI in which I felt very ostracized and also very poor and decided to drop out. But what was the point of adding that layer of her feeling ostracized and being racially profiled if it, like, didn't matter? Because I think they really wanted to, like, set this movie in the modern day and address, like, real issues, but they didn't have anything to say about them because there was already so much already going on in the story. which we'll get to later, but it doesn't make any sense for them to be like, for her to be like, yeah, when I was there, I was searched. I was racially profiled because they thought that I was poor and that I was a person of color, that I must have stolen this pearl necklace, and they were actually wrong. And then all her dad does is like, oh, racism happens to the best of us. And then, like, Betty has this very important line of being like, you're not listening to her. And then that's the extent of that conversation. They just sort of bring up the fact that, like, oh, not only does she have this financial burden of going to this school, but also this social and, like, a mental burden of, like, feeling very out of place in this already weird new environment that she's going into, which is a very real concern. Like, nobody wants to, on top of being like thousands of dollars in debt, having to deal with microaggressions all day. That's why I dropped out of my last school. But it's like nobody cared. It's because she decides to go to school anyway. She decides to go back. It's like in the musical when she decides to go back, she has a whole song about it where she's, it's after Abuela's death, and she's like, oh, you worked so hard so that I could learn, and that everybody here has worked so I could get an education, and I'm going to not waste this opportunity because I've seen how your death really puts everything into perspective. We'll also get to that. There's so many, like, working cogs in this story that's hard to just pick one part and talk about it, so we're gonna be jumping around, but we're gonna try to keep it focused. But this concern, this very real concern that adds a whole nother layer on top of why she doesn't want to go back to Stanford, is never addressed, because she just sort of goes to this like rally with Sonny, and she's like, oh, well, look at all these people struggling, I guess I have an opportunity to help them. And then she just, like, does a full 180, and she's like, you're right, Dad, I'm gonna go back to Stanford because I'm going to make a difference. And, like, it's never addressed that she, like, has to deal with very serious racism on a day-to-day basis at this, like, Ivy League school in which she is already in debt, and her family business, which she was already upset that had to be cut down because Kevin owned not only the Dispatch but the dry cleaners next door. They've already, like, downsized their business, which she was already upset about, but now he's completely selling the business, and she just, like, all of her concerns are just sort of wiped away. And it's never really addressed, like, the actual concerns that she has. So I'm like, why was this a whole big conflict? Why would you increase the conflict around this if nothing is going to be resolved? You know? It just doesn't really make any sense, because she had many real concerns, many real, like, reasons to not want to go back to Stanford. Like, there was racism. We are so in debt. Not only are we in debt, but you already sold half of your business, and it only covered my first year of a 4-year school. So there were so many very real reasons why she shouldn't have gone back to Stanford, and yet she just, in, like, a afternoon, just decides to change her mind. And it's, those concerns are never, like, resolved, and that upsets me. Maybe I'm just biased because I did the other way, but it's fine. It's not fine, but let's keep going. We have other things to talk about. Small thing, why did they add a third salon lady? There's Daniela, Carla, and now this third lady. I'm not mad about it, I just don't get why they needed to add a third lady and what she adds to the story. Could you not have casted, I forget the actress's name, the one from Orange is the New Black, could you not have casted her in just, like, a different role? I don't know. I don't have any issue with it because it doesn't, like, hurt the story like these other changes that I'm going to get into, like the Nina racially profiled section of the story. It doesn't ruin the story, but I'm just, like, confused. But switching to Usnavi really quick, why did they make us believe he was in the Dominican Republic the whole time? Because in all of the flashback or the sort of narrative storytelling scenes, which we'll get to in a second, that I also didn't like, he's, like, clearly on a beach. We're supposed to believe in the Dominican Republic with all these kids, and he's, like, telling the story of, like, what happened in this summer. Why did they make us believe he was in the Dominican Republic? Because it's not like a twist. It's not like a fun twist. It is a twist because it's you think one thing and then it's actually the other. But it's not a joyful twist. It doesn't, like, bring you any relief or joy, because the whole point of the story is them trying to convince Usnavi to stay. Is literally Sonny being like, hey, don't leave the block because it's getting gentrified. And Usnavi being like, fuck you. We'll get to that later. It was also a little weird. But then there's also a big moment in Champagne where Vanessa is like, you ought to stay. And like, there's all of this like tension building up of being like, oh my goodness, is Usnavi going to decide whether or not he's going to stay in New York or move to the Dominican Republic? But because we're seeing like basically all these scenes in a flashback because he's telling the story in the future, there's none of that tension. It's all sort of in vain because we think that he's already gone. Like, there's no point in seeing all these people trying to fight for him to stay when we already know that he's left. But then they just twist, and it's sort of just like annoying. It's like, in my mind, it was just sort of annoying because it's sort of like when your favorite character on a TV show dies and then you like mourn them and you're really sad and like angry that they're gone, but then they bring them back. And it's like, I'm not upset that he's back. I'm upset that you made me go through all of this thinking that they were dead. And I went through all of these emotions and it just sort of cheapens the whole thing. You know what I'm talking about? Does that make any sense? I just think that it didn't add anything for us to think that he had already left, because that just sort of ruins all of the arguments for him to stay because we already thought that he had left. Anyways, talking about those like narrative storytelling scenes again, why did we have those? Like, in the story sort of opens with Usnavi on a beach talking to all these children. He's sort of telling the story of what happened in the Heights. And why did we need that? We didn't need a narrator to this story. I don't think the narrator added anything, and also in the opening number, he clearly breaks the fourth wall by like, when the tourists come up to him and are like, how do we get to this place? He looks at the camera and winks. So I'm like, if you weren't doing the narrative, if you were doing this narrator storytelling thing in order to keep from breaking the fourth wall, then what was the purpose? Because all of these like sort of like guiding monologues in order to like take us through the story could have just been done in either voiceover or to the camera if you're already going to break the fourth wall, you know? But also, going off of that, we learned that in the end of the movie that one of the kids that he's telling the story to is him and Vanessa's daughter. And once again, why? I don't care. I don't care that he has a kid. What does that add to the story? Like, especially because in the end of the musical, it's like not established whether or not Vanessa and Usnavi are together. All he says is, I've stepped into Vanessa, I'm getting a second date. And that's all that we know about the relationship. Like, why did we need to know that, yes, they're endgame and that they do get together? I thought it was already very clear that even though he's Sonny's cousin, that Sonny is sort of like a childlike figure to him, that like Usnavi is sort of like his surrogate dad, even though he has a dad that's also in this movie that we'll get to in a second. So like, there was nothing in Usnavi's character that would make me believe that having a child and having a family was like his overall goal, was something that he wanted. So it's not like a triumphant moment to be like, oh my goodness, he did get what he wanted. Because throughout the whole fucking movie, we thought that he wanted to leave the country. Like, him having a child and a family at the end doesn't prove or show anything. But let's talk about Vanessa now, really quick. Why? What did they do to her character? Is being hot not enough? I get that this musical was made in the early 2000s. It's not like the most PC musical, but is being hot and wanting to get out of the fucking ghetto not enough? Is that not enough? Does she have to be a girl boss who wants to be a fashion designer? Did we really need to do that when we already have girl boss Nina Rosario? Why? Her being into like art and fashion design added literally nothing to the story. It actively took away from moments we could have had with other characters that added to the narrative. Like, there's a whole scene of her like going and grabbing scraps from the garbage, and that scene goes on for like minutes, and I'm like, why? Why do we care? They tried to really shoehorn Vanessa in to make her more crucial to the overall story, but it's very clear that she's not, and that they're trying to force her in because the whole story could have gone on perfectly without her. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, they have to make us believe that she has to have some sort of overall dream, and I'm like, she really doesn't. I think just wanting to move is enough. I think being like, hey, our neighborhood is 100% completely underrepresented because it's a neighborhood full of people of color and the world is racist. So there are things like blackouts that go on for days because they don't care about us living here. So I would like to move. And that could be enough. That could be enough. That would have even been a better storyline, but they don't mention that at all. Like, Sonny mentions the gentrification thing, and Vanessa seems to, like, agree, but that doesn't seem to be her motive, because her motive seems to just be wanting to create fashion, which is so stupid. I think they wanted to make her like a stronger female character, but she just like is so dumb now. Because before she was just like, I want to move, and also I'm hot, and I'm just here to be Usnavi's love interest, and that was okay. And also all of her designs were so ugly, and I just don't understand. And also she walks by the New York Institute of like Fashion, and like she like looks at it wistfully, but she like, there's no mention of her wanting to go to school for fashion. That's not like her dream. Her dream is just to do the fashion. It doesn't make any sense. And also, how old are these people? Because Usnavi said that he's almost 30. Vanessa looks like she's in her early 20s, but they're supposed to have gone to school at the same time. Also, Nina is also in like her first year of college. But Usnavi's pushing 30. What age are these people? Are the girls just much younger than the men? Because that's sus. We should have tried to fix that, if anything. I don't know. But now that we're talking about Vanessa and Usnavi, let's talk about their relationship and how it is impossible to root for them. Was anybody rooting for them to get together? Because every time Vanessa seemed to talk to Usnavi, she had such like an attitude about her, and I don't want to like play into the stereotypes of like all like women of color, but specifically black women, even though she's not black, but it sort of goes in hand, race as a political concept, blah 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 blah. I don't want to like go into that stereotype and play into that of like, oh, just because she's a strong woman of color that she's inherently aggressive, but like she did not seem to care about Usnavi at all. Like, in the scene with the Tide pen, she just sort of looks annoyed with him. And then when we get to the club, when they're all supposed to have their big moment in the blackout, they obviously get like lost and separated from each other. And then when they find each other, instead of Nina and Betty getting into a fight because their whole relationship was also fucked, we'll get into that later, they have this whole changed like verse in Blackout, which like, I will admit sounds very good. I cannot wait to get the movie soundtrack because some of those lines hit. Some of those lines are fun. But Usnavi literally looks at Vanessa because if you know the whole, like, the whole dance club scene, Vanessa's, like, dancing with other people. After Usnavi literally says, fine. Like, a guy comes up to Vanessa and is like, you want to dance? And she's like, no, I'm good. And then Usnavi steps in and is like, if you want to dance with him, that's fine. And she's like, you don't mind? And he's like, I'm fine. He literally says he's fine with this whole scenario. He stepped in after she said no and gave her permission, and then he wants to get jealous, dance with someone else, find her outside of the club, and then call her a whore. Not in those exact words, but in one of the changed lines that they have, he says, you were shaking your ass over half of the heights. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's very clear that Usnavi says it in a derogatory way. And, like, we're fine with that. What? I'm so sorry. In what way are we supposed to root for these people? In what way are we supposed to want these two people to get together? Because it's clear that they don't get along. It's clear that Usnavi has a crush on Vanessa, but other than that, there is no, like, sort of, like, inkling that Vanessa likes Usnavi back or that they would be a good couple together at all. Like, there's the scene in the salon where Daniela makes the joke that Usnavi was hooking up with somebody else and Vanessa supposedly gets like jealous, but I thought that at the end of the scene when Vanessa like runs off after learning that news that she was going to go talk to Usnavi to be like, oh, she was jealous, she wants to check in with him to make sure that like, oh, he's still single and on the market and I still have a chance. But no, she just goes to her apartment meeting. So like, there is nothing, literally nothing to make us think that Vanessa likes Usnavi, let alone that they would be a good couple together, because he does not respect her. her. He likes the idea of her. She's probably the hottest person that he knows. But other than, does he deserve her? No. Does he treat her right? No. Like, sure, he helps her get an apartment, but how do we know that's because, like, Usnavi is a good person and not just because he wants to win, like, brownie points with Vanessa? Because he has big nice guy energy, and I've always hated Usnavi. Maybe I'm biased. If you want to go on my Tumblr, I make many anti-Usnavi de la Vega posts. I hate that man. But he just, like, does not respect Vanessa. And I don't get how we're supposed to be, like, happy at the end that they have, like, a family and kids when they were a horrible couple together. And on top of that, they changed the entire, like, timeline of the movie. In the musical takes place over, like, 2 days, 3 days. It's very short, sort of, like, weekend. Like, 4th of July weekend, it's very quick. But in the movie, it takes place over, like, 2 months. There's a giant 30-day time jump after the blackout. And in those 30 days, Vanessa and Usnavi do not talk at all. At least that's what we're, like, meant to believe, is that, like, Benny and Nina are, like, having a fun time being a couple together, which is, we'll get to that. But Usnavi and Vanessa, like, don't talk. Like, they're sitting on the steps together, and they have, like, this weird moment. Maybe it's just because the actors have no chemistry together. I just don't think that they like each other. Like, I do not look at those two people and think, oh my goodness, they're so in love. They hate each other. They hate each other. But now that we've mentioned the timeline, let's talk about my whole issue with the entire scene for the song Champagne. Because that is probably one of the best scenes in the musical that has a lot of tension. I guess that scene is supposed to make us believe that Vanessa likes Usnavi, but, like, everything else tells me that she doesn't. So it's hard to believe that just because she kissed him that she, like, cares. It's really easy to think of that as, like, a iCarly, Carly and Freddie moment, you know, when he, like, pushes her out of the way and saves her from the bus and she feels, like, indebted to him. It's very easy to read it that way, and that's the only way that I can read it, especially based off all the previous actions in which they do not get along. But the whole reason that In the Heights is set over 3 days is to, one, keep up with the fast-paced sort of timeline and music. It all sort of goes together in that fashion, but also because these all need to be very rash, sort of split-second decisions in which, like, a lot of things are happening at once and it really puts your life into perspective for you to realize what you want. But the fact that this was set over 30 days really just gets rid of all of that tension and all of that sort of feeling of, like, anticipation and adrenaline. That's sort of like pushing all of their actions. Because at the end of the musical, they are still in the blackout. Right? Am I crazy? Did I just make all that up? I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure by the end of the musical, they're still in the blackout, which gives Champagne so much meaning that was completely stripped in the movie, and that really upsets me. Okay, let's talk about the fact that this was set 30 days later. This was set so far in the future, past the blackout, that the blackout is long past. The blackout has been done for, like, a month. They are over and done with it. I think that they changed it to give it a more, like, realistic timeline because it takes time to, like, move to a different country, but, like, also, we could have just suspended the disbelief, couldn't we? In these 30 days, though, for some reason, Vanessa has already moved to her new apartment, which is weird. I don't think that it's, like, impossible that this could have happened, but there's no reason for them to have moved her already to her apartment, because then that makes her change a bunch of her lines when it could have just been like, oh, I just got approved and I just moved my stuff in. I have not moved out there yet, but I'm going to. It made them change a bunch of lines in Champagne that they didn't need to, like the vacation, Vanessa, you're leaving too. I'm going down to West 4th Street, you can take that line. They had to change it all to past tense when they just really didn't need to. Like, they could have just had her, like, had not moved yet. It was unnecessary. There were a lot of unnecessary changes in this that made it worse. I don't think that necessarily, like, ruins it. Again, if I didn't see the musical, I don't think I would have had an issue with it, but I just think it was stupid and silly. Another thing, when Vanessa brings the bottle of champagne over, she says, I went next door to get it instead of I went downtown to get it. I don't know why they changed it. Maybe there was some weird set design thing that I missed, that there's a nice wine shop or liquor shop next door. I don't understand why they changed it, because in my mind, the idea of getting something from downtown means that it's nice and fancy. Because when you live in a neighborhood in which you are very underrepresented, a lot of people of color, a lot of poor people, because socioeconomics, blah, 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 the things here are not that nice. You have to go into the city, downtown, to get nice things. So the idea was that she went downtown, she went into town to get them a nice bottle of champagne, was sort of erased by the fact that, oh, I just went next door to get it. Why? Why did you change that line? I don't know. I think it's stupid. But on top of all that, the idea was that the bottle of champagne was cold, which was a sort of relief in the middle of a blackout in the middle of summer. Like, she's like, I brought you a bottle of cold champagne. The bottle's all sweaty and everything. And it's sort of like a big deal that, like, in the middle of blackout, in the middle of the July heat of New York, that when everything's so hot and they probably have, like, no ice water because their fridges are broken because they're 3 days into a blackout, that an ice cold bottle of champagne would have been doubly nice, on top of the fact that it's a celebratory drink, but also it's cold because we're hot, because we've been in a blackout. But we're 30 days past the blackout now, so all of that is cut. They didn't need to do this. It's just really, it doesn't seem like a big thing, but in my mind, there's a lot going into this moment that they've just sort of chopped for no reason. But that's all my issues with the champagne scene. It's a lot. They sort of ruined the whole context around the scene, which sort of ruins the scene in general. The scene is now just sort of like a catalyst for their kiss, which I'm not even rooting for anymore because they don't like each other. But moving on from that, let's talk about the finale really quick. The horrible, horrible, horrible finale that they completely fucked up because they fucked up all the songs leading up to it. Let's talk about the finale. First of all, the song is definitely cut. There's a bunch of lines that he sings in the musical that are not in the movie. They do that to a lot of songs, and that pisses me off. There's a lot of songs that are, like, rearranged and sort of spliced up. And I don't know. I know that Lin-Manuel Miranda was, like, involved in the making of this, and I don't know how much creative control he had, or if he's just really stupid. But I think we can all know, as people who watch and enjoy musicals, that the songs progress the story. Yes, we're on the same page. And if you change the story, you have to also change the songs, because the songs are part of the story. They're not just like in Mamma Mia, where you can just drop them in forever. Like, the songs are an integral part in telling the story. So if you're changing what the story is telling, you have to change the songs. And they don't. And when they do it badly. But let's talk about the finale. Before we see, Usnavi and his kid and all of that mess, we do the ending scene that's usually just Usnavi, Sonny, and Pete. And it's Sonny who gave all this money to Pete to paint this mural of Abuela on the grate of the bodega. But this is just not a part of the story anymore, because they also absolutely ruined Abuela's character, but we'll get to it after we talk about this. Instead of there being a nice, beautiful mural of Abuela to, show that she's a pillar of the community and show Usnavi that the reason that he's staying is to live on in her legacy, blah, 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 blah. We see Vanessa in the bodega with all of her fucking mannequins and her ugly outfits, and Usnavi looks at them and is like, you made these last night? There goes my flight. You're telling me that the reason that this man stays in New York after being so hell-bent on moving to DR is because of these ugly-ass outfits that Vanessa made? Are you serious? Are you serious? Why? There is no emotional impact or logic at all in this decision. It doesn't make any sense. He is 30 days into this decision. He set his mind on moving to a whole different country. His stuff is all packed. He has been a month into doing all this paperwork and all this moving bullshit. He has sat on this decision. But Vanessa makes, like, a pantsuit, and he's like, I guess I have to stay. What? What? It is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. The dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And it also just ruins the whole wonderful moment of Abuela. Let's talk about her now. Her character doesn't do anything to the story. I thought maybe they killed off Nina's mom so that, Abuela could be the mother figure of the story, but no. She has maybe one talk with Nina that she already has in the musical. She cooks for dinner, and she sings, Calor, and then that's it. And then she dies. And then she's basically never thought of again. She, like, the whole point is that Abuela dying is this huge turning point in all the motivations of the characters in the musical, because her death, like, affected them so strongly that they have to really reconsider what home is, where their priorities lie, what they're going to do with their lives. And, like, that was supposed to happen in the movie, but no, literally none of that happens. They cut her song for Hundreds of Stories, which already doesn't make any sense, because it's supposed to establish how much Abuela means to Usnavi and how much their lives are intertwined, blah, 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 blah. But when she sings Calor, she's doing it, like, on her deathbed. Like, this is in the blackout, and everybody's, like, in her apartment, and she is, like, lying down on her bed, and she is, like, looking at all of her family having, like, a good, fun 4th of July. And then she goes into, like, this dream sequence in which she sings about, you know, how hard her and her family work to, you know, make it in America. And then she's like, do I stay or do I die? And then she decides to die. And that's the end of her character. That's all that she does to the story. Also, Abuela's death was weird as hell. Why would you have her sing her big song of sort of just, like, describing who she is as a character just for her to die? What is the point of us learning about a character, like, seconds before they die? Like, literally as they're dying. Like, we don't know anything about Abuela until she sings her song about how she worked so hard. Her and her family worked so hard to make it in America, and then she's like, I guess it's time for me to go, homies. What was the point? What was the point of even learning about her if she's just gonna die? And then also, her story does not affect any of the characters, because Nina doesn't sing her song about how Abuela's death has encouraged her to move back to college. Her death also does not give Usnavi the monetary means to go move back to the Dominican Republic, and then her death does not then convince him in the mural to stay in New York. So, like, what was the point? 1 of her dying, 2 of her dying after we learn everything about her, and then 3, her dying if it doesn't affect, it just doesn't make any sense. I just don't get it. Her death had no impact on the story, just like Nina's mom's death had no impact on the story. Like, yes, I guess they sing Alabanza, and we see Usnavi, like, cry, but, like, that's it. That's it. There's no lasting effects of her death, like it does in the musical. Nina does not mention Abuela's death at all. She just sort of stands with Usnavi as he cries, and they sing Alabanza together, but, like, literally, if you're going to kill her actual mother in the story and then kill her mother figure in the story and have Nina, like, not mention it or react to it or have any impact on her at all, what was the point? She was such an important part of the story, and by them just sort of ripping her out of it, I think it ruins a lot of the storytelling, because nothing makes any sense anymore. Because she doesn't sing Hundreds of Stories, we don't see how important she is to Usnavi, therefore him moving to DR also doesn't make any sense now. Because we're supposed to understand by the finale that he realizes that, oh, moving back home was her dream and not his. And his dream was to be home and, like, I found my island, I've been on it this whole time, I'm home. We don't get any of that. But also, because Abuela is apparently not a big part of the story anymore, and also Nina's not a big part of the story anymore, we don't get Everything I Know, which is a beautiful song. I love that song so much. Every time I heard it live, I would just sob. And it's such, like, a big point in, like, her character development of being like, I cannot waste this opportunity I was given. You know? But we don't get any of that because Abuela and Nina are barely in this story. But I think the worst decision that they made in this movie was completely erasing the entire lottery ticket storyline, which, if you've seen the musical, is a pretty big part of it. Like, they do the whole 96,000 number of being like, what would you do if you won the lottery? And then we don't find out that Abuela won until the last 5 minutes of the movie. And you might be thinking, Sam, how do any of these characters have any motivations to do anything if they don't know that they have the means to move? And to you, fine person, I have no answer. I don't fucking know. The whole reason that Usnavi was able to move to the Dominican Republic is because he had the money from the lottery. I think maybe perhaps all the people working on the movie are too rich. I think that they don't realize that the whole point of 96,000, I don't understand how Lin-Manuel Miranda worked on this movie when he also wrote the musical. Maybe he just accidentally wrote all these things in. Maybe he didn't mean to write a good musical, because I feel like all of the things that made In the Heights the musical make sense and be like smart and a wonderful story are just sort of gone. And I don't know how he worked on this movie while also just letting all those things fly by the wayside. But like, the whole point of 96,000 is to emphasize the fact that poor people, working class people, will never be able to follow any of their dreams and make it out of the rat race of capitalism without literally winning the lottery. That's why in the opening number, Usnavi says, they press through the mess, bounce checks, and wonder what's next in the heights. Like, literally people are working paycheck to paycheck. The only way that they can get out of this is to literally win the lottery. And that's just sort of erased. We just sort of forgot. We're just like, oh, who cares? The lottery, somebody, I guess, won $96,000, but I guess it doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter. How the fuck did Usnavi have the money to move countries? He didn't even sell the bodega. The bodega was just closed. I guess he gave it to Sonny? But, like, because Vanessa says that she asked Sonny to open the bodega. The bodega was not closed. He didn't sell it. So, like, how does he have the money to move to a different country if he doesn't know he has the lottery money until after he's made all of his decisions? He doesn't find it until after this 30-day time jump. It doesn't make any sense. Like, having the lottery money is such a big point in the story. Is like, Abuela sings Calor before she dies, and she's like, what do I do with this winning ticket? That whole line is completely cut from the movie because they can't spoil that she won the ticket. And I guess that's also why they had to cut hundreds of stories, because they didn't want to spoil. It's like not a twist. It's like literally the motivation of all of these characters. The only reason that Usnavi is like moving is because he has the money. Like, it's just really fucking stupid. And also the only reason that he was able to help co-sign for Vanessa's apartment is because he had the money. I don't know how much money they're thinking that we think that Usnavi makes at this bodega, but there's no way that it's enough for him to like pack up his whole life and move to the Dominican Republic. Literally no way. Because like, then the question arises, why did he move to the Dominican Republic before these events? If he was able to, because there's nothing monetarily that has changed for him in the events of the story. So I just don't get why they hid all this information. It doesn't make any sense. Going back to 96,000 a little bit, what were those graphics? You know, at the beginning of the number, they're like drawing things on the screen and like acting things out with like animated effects over it. There was also a little bit of that in the opening number. Why? We can imagine. And like, it never shows up again. Like, it's only just in those two numbers that there's like a little bit of like animation on top of it. We didn't need that. It was weird. It didn't make any sense. Another thing that doesn't make any sense, they only sometimes translate the Spanish. You know how in the musical, like, they'll say something in Spanish and then just, like, auto-translate it into English? Like, there are just some moments when they're just speaking in Spanish and then there's, like, subtitles on the screen, but then there's sometimes they're speaking in Spanish and it's, like, not. Like, either make the decision that, oh, this movie is for Latin people, by Latin people, we all speak Spanish, this is about us and our culture, and then not care about the people who don't speak Spanish, or be like, no, this movie is for everybody, we will translate all of the Spanish. Maybe it's just like those were the only lines that were not like verbally translated back into English, but then like, why not just keep it consistent? It was just weird and it didn't make any sense. Like a lot of the things in this movie. Let's talk about Sonny now, I guess, because talking about things that are weird and don't make any sense, let's talk about Sonny's fucking character. I think Sonny was great. He was very, very funny, but they gave him a whole new storyline for like no reason. They made him an undocumented immigrant, which is like, I'm not saying like those things are not important to talk about, but like, again, there was already so much going on in the musical and so much going on in this movie that like him now needing so much screen time to talk about the fact that he's an undocumented immigrant and making that such like a central part of the story takes away from literally everything else. And we didn't need that. We didn't need that at all. I'm guessing, like, again, they just wanted to make it more modern and talking about things that, like, are affecting people in the modern day, but also, like, we didn't need that. Like, it doesn't add anything, because it's not like they make any commentary on it other than, oh, undocumented immigrants not having equal treatment in America is bad. And like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I think we could all agree on that. Like, there was nothing that they were saying outside of the obvious. So like, I don't get why they needed to add that to Sonny's character. I feel like they did a lot in the story where they just sort of bring up issues and then they don't like talk about them, say anything about them, resolve them. Like with Nina's racially profiled moment, like Sonny's undocumented immigrant moment, they're both just sort of there for you to like look at. Maybe it's supposed to spark conversation or something, but the only conversation that I'm talking about is like, why was that included? It doesn't add anything to the story, especially if you're not going to say anything about it or do anything about it. Like, literally all that happens with Sonny, we have this weird scene between Usnavi and Sonny's dad where like it's confirmed that he's sort of just like a deadbeat father, and his dad is like, have you ever considered why you only pay him in cash? And it's supposed to imply that he can't get a bank account because he's undocumented. And then Sonny and Nina go to like this protest where Sonny learns that he can't get financial aid in college because he's undocumented. And I think this movie, marginalized people watching this will understand what I'm talking about. If you have privilege, I'm sorry, you won't get it. But there are movies made about marginalized people for the majority. And I think that this movie is definitely that. Like, Love, Simon was a gay movie for straight people. This movie is a Latin POC movie for white people. I think the only reason that they brought these things up was to bring them to white people attention. Like, all the white people who are going to watch this, they just wanted, like, them to be aware that these are the struggles that undocumented immigrants face. Like, because other than that, they're not saying anything about it, and it doesn't add anything to the story. It's just sort of like a PSA in the middle of this movie, which doesn't make any sense. Like, I think the musical was by Latin people, for Latin people, and that's why I really liked it. But it's clear that this movie just sort of, like, they bring up issues that we face without saying anything about them. And I think they're only sort of doing that for the white audiences that are going to watch it, which is annoying and a shame. And then they also kill almost all of Sonny and Pete's, like, friendship. Like, you see them sort of bickering in the final scene, like in a friendly sort of way, but it's like, they literally have no scenes together in which you can tell that they're friends. Like, their friendship is completely erased from the movie, which is a shame, honestly. I get it because they casted Pete as, like, a 20-something and Sonny's, like, maybe 15. So they wouldn't be friends, but also, like, they didn't have to do that. They could have just made Pete Sonny's age, and they could have just been friends. But they're not, and none of that is included in the story at all. Like, you see them together in the blackout, and that's about it. Like, there's not that scene in the beginning in which Sonny and Pete are sort of, like, talking and chatting and being friends, and Usnavi has to be like, don't hang around that rascal. And there's not the scene in the finale in which you see Sonny pay Pete to make this mural to get Usnavi to stay, because now the whole central idea is around Vanessa for some reason. Like, they really just sort of diminished the friendship that Sonny and Pete had for no reason. It honestly takes away from a lot of the story, and also the impact that Sonny has on Usnavi staying. Like, the whole reason that Usnavi stays is because Sonny fights so hard for him to stay, and that's just completely erased because they gave that whole moment to Vanessa. But also, in the blackout, they don't have the bodega be vandalized. I don't know why. Maybe because negative stereotype about people of color, maybe? They didn't want to show people of color vandalizing things? I don't know. They could have just been white people. You could have just casted white people. I don't know why they didn't do that, because that would have been, that's a big moment in which Sonny and Pete are like, oh, well, we have to defend the bodega. And then that just doesn't happen. But speaking of the blackout, Betty does something really weird in it, because Betty's character is completely also ruined in this movie, which I don't get at all. Betty and Nina's relationship is completely different from here than in the musical. It's clear in the musical that Nina's dad, Kevin, does not like Benny. And from my interpretation and from my understanding and from the regional versions that I've seen of it, is because he is black. Like, the reason that Benny is traditionally cast as a black man is to talk about the anti-blackness in the Latin community. The reason why, it's not just because Kevin has this whole line where he's like, you don't speak Spanish, you're not Latino. So it's not just only that he's not Latino, which would have been like a thing within itself, but not only is he not Latino, he is black. It's supposed to provide commentary on the anti-blackness in the Latin community. That's the whole point of Benny not being allowed to be with Nina and all of the tension in their relationship. All of that does not exist in this movie because Benny and Nina were already together before she left for college, and Kevin has no issue with Benny. When we get to like the club scene in which Nina and Benny are supposed to have this argument because he lost his job so that she can go to college, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't happen. They just dance together, just like a happy couple. And then you might be thinking, okay, but then where does Sunrise fit in? Because Sunrise is supposed to be the big moment in which they get together in the blackout. They just sing the song. And it has no narrative purpose at all. It's like literally after the blackout, 30 days, it's in that time jump. It's after that time jump. And they're just standing on the fireplace, and Nina says, "Let me just listen to my block," which is like her catchphrase in the movie for some reason. And then she's like, "I missed the blackout." And then they're like, "Let's just pretend that we're in the blackout." And then they just sing Sunrise. It doesn't make any fucking sense. There's no reason, there's no narrative purpose for the song anymore. You already cut a bunch of the other songs, might as well cut this one too, because now this one just is stupid. Because it's supposed to be like this big moment in which they're like, okay, we've finally gotten together and we've gotten past all of this, like tension between us. Now we're going to fight to try to stay together while you are literally going to move across the country again. There's no tension between their characters. There is no issue. They just sort of get back together. And that's the last we see of them. They sing Sunrise, and then I don't think that they're in the final song at all, because we don't see them. So, yeah. They fucking ruin their entire storyline. Like, Benny and Nina's conflict is a big part of the overall storyline. And I think they just sort of cut all of that so that they would have time to tell Vanessa's fashion design storyline, which was so stupid and adds nothing to the plot. You would think if they wanted to talk about, modern day issues and trying to make this a PSA for white people, that they would be like, hey, anti-blackness in the Latin community or anti-blackness in general, kind of important to talk about. But no, they don't mention it because it's not an issue. Kevin's not racist. He doesn't have any prejudice against black people. No, he's cool. He's chill. There's also this weird thing though, how in the blackout where they've all like exited the club and they're looking for each other, Benny, Usnavi, and Nina all find each other, and then Benny sees like this taxi cab that's like stranded in the street, and he's like, I have to go. And then Nina's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I might not have a job tomorrow, but I have a duty to the dispatch service. And he like goes to the dispatch, leaves Nina with Usnavi for some reason, runs to the dispatch and like starts directing cabs. Why? I get that in this version he doesn't have like beef with Kevin anymore, but like also why do you feel this like moral obligation to this business in which you have no claims or reason over? Because it's not like a way for him to like win over Kevin. This would be a good moment if like, oh, Kevin has been kind of an asshole, but even through all that, like, Benny's gonna be the bigger person and try to help the business, even though he truly has no reason to. He's just going to be a good person. But, like, there's no reason. There is no reason. This adds nothing to the story for us to see Benny do this. Like, I guess they just didn't want him in the room when Abuela died, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, in the musical, Benny has the whole line in the club, which they completely cut, when Nina comes up to him and he's like, I'll never be good enough for your family, for you. It's very clear that the reason that he thinks that is because he's black. Like, I'll never be good enough for your family because no matter what I do, I will always be black. And they could have had such good commentary on that, about how prejudice exists even within POC communities, and we are stronger together than we are apart, blah, 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 blah. We could have had a whole lot of that. That would be great. But no, this movie is for white people, so we couldn't have any of that. It was just a very big missed opportunity, which upset me. But we're not done yet. One last thing. Like I said, they've changed this movie to be modern day. It's originally set in the early 2000s, but they've changed it to be set in the modern 2019, 2020, which on its own is fine, but they also need to realize a lot of the reasons that things happen in the musical is because of the time period that they're set in, and I don't think that they realize a lot of that. Because they changed a lot of lines, but they did not change the line in Sunrise, when Betty is singing to Nina and he's like, when you leave town, I'm going to buy you a calling card because I'm falling hard for you. Now, do you know what a calling card is? If you don't, congratulations. You were born in the 21st century. A calling card is basically just like a minutes card, I'm guessing. I don't know. I was also born in the 21st century, so I don't know these things. But from what I understand, it's just basically like a minutes card. It's something that he can give to Nina so that she will always have money to be able to call home and talk to him. Because we live in the great year of 2021, nobody needs calling cards anymore. We just have phones. We just have cell phones that can just make calls most of the time on an unlimited plan for free. So they didn't change that line, even though they changed so many other lines that, again, did not need to be changed. They missed this one line. Maybe he was trying to say it like as a joke, but it sounded very earnest the way that he said that. And it doesn't make any sense if it's set in the modern day, because nobody uses calling cards anymore. Another big issue is that in the blackout scene, you know, the whole reason that nobody can get like any service or signals is because we're in the early 2000s and flip phones don't really have that wide, I could just be pulling this out of my ass, but I'm pretty sure flip phones need to rely on like local signal towers. So if the power goes out in a city, then you won't have any service. But like phones now can connect to satellites, so we will always have service. Could be wrong. Could again just be a symptom of this underdeveloped community, but that's what I understand. So the whole issue in the blackout is that nobody could call each other because flip phones, no service. But now in the blackout, there's a very clear scene in which they're like, where's Vanessa? And Usnavi's like, I don't know, I called and I texted her and I can't find her. So like, there should be no conflict because she should have just answered her phone. And then when she finds him, she's like mad at him because she's like, you abandoned me. And I'm like, he called you. If you don't answer your phone, that's not on him. Like, it just seemed very silly. This whole movie seemed very silly. And I know I just went on like an hour-long rant about all the things I didn't like about this movie and how it made no sense. And I stand by all of that. But there were a couple things that I did like, and we're going to talk about those. I liked how... Oh, no, wait, sorry, one more thing I don't like. Forgot. It's in my notes. When Usnavi sings Alabanza, he has this line that says, I'd like to think that she went at a peace with pieces of breadcrumbs in her hand. Bestie, you were in the room when she died. What do you mean? I'd like to think you were there. That line doesn't make any sense because in the blackout in the musical, he doesn't like live with her. They weren't all there. She wasn't surrounded by loved ones, which again is a bit more sad, and I get why you would want to make that change, but then you also have to change the song because again, in musicals, the songs have a storytelling element. If you change the story, you have to change the songs. So that line doesn't make any sense because you were there. But let's get to the things that I liked. I liked how the Salon Ladies came over for their big family dinner, in which, you know, it's usually just Usnavi, Benny, Vanessa, Nina, the Rosarios, and Abuela. The Salon Ladies also came over, and they had a whole, like, sort of party together. I liked that. That was fun. That was cute, and it made sense. It made sense because in the musical, even though they cut this number, there's a whole moment in which Nina's going through all these photo albums, and she's like, oh, there's a photo of the ladies from Daniela's that Abuela kept, so they're all like, you know, clearly close family friends, so it would make sense that the Salon Ladies would be at this big family dinner that they're all having when Nina comes back from college. It makes sense. If you've seen the musical, they don't really make it make sense in the movie, but again, I don't think you would have an issue with it if you haven't seen the musical. It would make more sense if they didn't cut that song, but it's fine. I like that they changed Pete's slightly racist line in 96,000. You know, got more hoes than a phone book in Tokyo. Ho is not a Japanese last name. So I'm glad that they changed that. That was fun. They also changed Benny's line, Tiger Woods and I are the links, and he's my caddy. I think that line's been changed because the version that I saw, the musical version that I saw, he says that version. But I know on the original Broadway cast version, it's Cheeto Man. I don't like his name. I'm not gonna say it. But you know who I'm talking about. So glad they changed that line. And I think that's it, bestie. I think those were the only things that they changed that I liked. I like how Lin-Manuel Miranda was the Paraguay guy and that Mr. Softy was Chris Jackson, and they have a cute little moment. I wish that they would have kept the reprise in, the reprise, whatever you want to call it, because that would have also been cute and funny, but we just get the one song, and that's cool, that's fine. I like how Lin-Manuel Miranda likes to cast all of his friends and things. It's kind of like the Adam Sandler thing, where it's Adam Sandler and all of his friends and all of his movies. But this version's POC. And if nepotism keeps POC booked and busy, I have no complaints. I like to see that. The score, even though it doesn't have any narrative purpose really anymore, is still very beautiful. Even the changed lines were still very good. And everybody sang beautifully. I really liked the design moment of when Nina comes back from Stanford. She has straightened hair, and then they take her to the salon, and for the rest of the movie she has curly hair. I think that's a wonderful little detail that's really fun and, you know, great commentary on assimilation and prominently white environments that they could have talked about, but they don't. I think everybody in the movie did a great job. I just think that the script itself was bad. Again, I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it was a great time. Let me talk about the things that I liked really quick. I think all of the actors were fantastic. I think every actor in the movie did a wonderful job. I have no issue with the acting, with the like cinematography, with like the design of it. I think it looked beautiful. I think a lot of the like it was visually a very fun movie to watch. There were a lot of great dance sequences. I think everybody was funny, everybody knew their lines, everybody was a great singer. But the script was butchered to hell. Whoever fucked up the script, I have words for you, because it is bad. But that's about it, bestie. That's about it. Again, I know I just complained about how nothing makes any sense and how they've ruined a lot of characters. But I think, again, the movie is not a bad movie. It's just a bad adaptation. If you're going off of the musical version, which was very strong narratively and, like, it does have its flaws, but I feel like instead of, you know, building on top of the already given story and, you know, hammering out all those flaws, like the fact that, like, it's very clear that Kevin is prejudiced against black people, and that's never really resolved, other than, you know, well, it kind of is, you know? There's the song Enough, where Nina's mom tells Nina's dad basically stop being prejudiced against Benny, and it's like a small moment, but we could have made that a bit bigger. I'm just thinking, there was no real loose ends in the musical version. Everything makes sense and everything was tied well together. And in the movie, nothing is resolved. Because in like the last moment, like the last day before Usnavi's meant to go to the DR, he is like sitting with like their attorney, lawyer friend or whatever with Sonny, trying to get him like a green card so that he has like legal status in the US. And then we don't know what happens, even though there's clearly a time jump, because again, all of these events of the summer are told sort of in like the past, because it's Usnavi telling the story to his kid. So we're at least like, she's maybe what, 7 to 10? We're at least like a decade in the future. So like, it's never resolved or followed up whether or not Sonny gets this green card. We don't know. We also don't know what happens with Nina's university. Does she end up finishing college? Do her and Benny stay together? We don't know. What happens to Mr. Rosario after he sells the Dispatch? What does the block look like? Has it been gentrified like we all believed? We don't know. None of that's ever resolved. None of that is ever resolved. We just know that Usnavi kept the bodega, and now he just sells Vanessa's ugly clothes out of it. And that's it. And it just doesn't, like, I don't get how you can write a whole script, read it over, and just think that that was okay. Like, I'm fine with adding new dimensions to these characters and adding more to the story if you're going to wrap it up by the end. Nothing is wrapped up. Nothing is concluded. It's very frustrating to, like, watch that movie when I know that they didn't like tell a complete story because so much was missing and then so much was left unanswered, you know? And also, really quick, I don't even think this movie passed the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test has really sort of general rules, just two named female characters having to have a conversation about something other than a man. And while like there were conversations, like especially between like Nina and Vanessa, I think they had one conversation, in which the general idea of it was not about a man, but there are men mentioned in almost every conversation that female characters have with each other. Like at the end of Vanessa and Nina's conversation, she's like, "Oh, Benny's here if you want to go see him," and like it's just like, if I don't think that this movie passes the Bechdel test. You know, I would love to be proven wrong if somebody wants to pull up with those deets, but you know, the fact that we have to like, you know, argue it at all is not a good sign. I also forgot to mention, I thought this movie was going to be a lot more about gentrification. It is not. There is one throwaway line in which Sonny, which is already in the musical, in like Carnaval de Barrio, where Sonny's like, "You close the bodega, the neighborhood is gone, and they'll never turn the lights back on," basically just being like, we're being gentrified. And in the musical, and in the movie, Usnavi is just like, "Okay, maybe we're powerless. Light up a candle. There's nothing going on here that we can't handle." And then Sonny is supposed to have his line where he's like, "This isn't funny. I'm not making a joke right now." And then Usnavi talks about how, "I'm going to give this money to you." But because he doesn't know about the lottery ticket, we cannot have that line. But point is, Sonny's supposed to like get mad at Usnavi and basically be like, "Yo, I'm being really serious right now. Like, this shit isn't funny." But Usnavi just sort of says that line, and then everything's fine, and that's never brought up again. Another thing, the whole finale is also ruined by the fact that they're not in the blackout anymore because they're literally saying the hydrants are open. Cool breezes blow or flow or something like that. The whole reason that this is like a big moment is because they're in a heat wave, in a blackout. They are so hot, and the hydrants bring this welcome reprieve in this moment of like stress and like sorrow that has swept this community. This is a moment of joy. This is what reminds Usnavi why he loves his block so much. That's why he says, just when you think you're sick of living here, the memories flood in, because he's being reminded about why he loves his community so much. And then he has the mural that's also supposed to remind him why he loves his community. Just all of this is ruined. All of this emotional impact is just gone. Those are my thoughts on the In the Heights movie. It comes out today. It's on HBO Max if you would like to find one of your friends who has it and ask for their login to go watch it. And let me know what you thought. If you've seen the movie, let me know. Did I miss some part of it that would explain a lot of these loose ends? Do you think any of these changes were warranted? If so, please tell me why. I am confused by a lot of these changes and they don't make any sense to me. Have you seen the musical? Do you like this version more than the musical? Just tell me your overall thoughts. And we will speak again when I do a video on the Dear Evan Hansen movie. Because if you know anything about me, I hate that musical. So it's gonna be fun to talk about the movie. You good? Shh. You good, fam? Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.